Whichever way you cut it, writing a novel represents a significant investment of time and effort. So how do you know whether that novel idea you have banging around in your head will go the distance? How do you avoid getting halfway through writing your novel and discovering that it's a complete dud? Well, stick around to find out, but make sure you've got a pad and pen ready because there's some grade A awesomeness coming your way. In my experience, there are two main factors at play when you're asking yourself this kind of question. How do you know whether that novel idea you have banging around in your head will go the distance? The first is fear, and the second is a lack of clarity. You're afraid that you'll venture off into the great blue yonder in your trusty dinghy, only to find yourself utterly lost at sea with no way back to dry land. Or you're standing on the shore, squinting through a telescope, trying to see the journey's end, but frustrated by the ever-present storms which obscure the horizon line. You're afraid of wasting time and effort, and you can't see ahead clearly enough to know whether writing this novel is going to be worth the time and investment. Well, hopefully what follows will help put your mind at ease. Before I address some of the common concerns and issues budding novelists face, we should have a quick word about the size and scope of your project. One of the most common reasons why people stop short of starting to write their first book is because they aim too far and too wide and get thoroughly intimidated by the work required to make their dream a reality. This is your first book, so starting off with a 600-page fantasy epic which rivals the works of George R.R. Martin or Brandon Sanderson is simply biting off far more than you can chew. You don't leave class on the first day of medical school and dive right into heart surgery, and you shouldn't expect to write a peerless fantasy epic for your first book. True, you might be a literary genius who's going to write a masterpiece on your first try, but if that's the case, you probably don't need to be watching this video. I should be watching your video. There's a certain mystique to the writing profession, but you're going to have to be very practical in your approach to this first novel if you want to succeed. If you want to write sprawling epic fantasies, that's great, but I'd suggest starting with something a little simpler first. Either a short, very targeted novel, or even a novella or a large short story. Something that's achievable but will still stretch you. Focus on a few key characters and the essential conflict and struggle within your story. Limit the world of your story to key locations and don't get lost in excessive world building. If you can limit the scope of your first book to an achievable goal, that means that your focus will be on making the book as good as it can possibly be. Developing relatable, intriguing characters that leap off the page, carefully crafting the twists and turns to your plot, and producing a neatly bound, well-written novel that readers will absolutely love. Allowing your scope to stay vast will likely result in you feeling overwhelmed during the writing process, and it might put you at risk of giving up once you realize just how big the task is to try and wrangle your mammoth manuscript into line. To quote Frank Herbert, fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. Now in our case, it's not some grand Bene Gesserit test threatening to end our lives, but fear certainly does kill. It kills your book before you even start. So let's look at some of the common fears related to starting your first novel and give them a good old walloping. Let me start by reiterating the oft-quoted maxim that there is nothing new under the sun. In fact, I'll take it one step further. Even the sun itself isn't new. There are literally dozens of them. If you're concerned that you might have an idea which another writer has already explored, let me put your mind at ease. Yes, someone has already written that idea, and odds are they've done a better job than you ever will. Welcome to the club. Given how long writing has been around and how many books have been published over the years, there's only a very slim chance that your amazing novel idea hasn't been thought of before in some way. But that's no reason not to write a novel. There's nothing to stop you putting a new spin on an old idea or approaching your story from a different angle. Plus, while readers crave original and unpredictable stories, we also love the familiarity and comfort of familiar tropes and storylines. If we take genre fiction as an example, say crime fiction, there are only so many ways a victim can be brutally murdered and then a homicide investigated. Hundreds, if not thousands of books follow the same basic formula with the genre, and yet readers gobble this sort of thing up year after year. Just because you're writing in a well-worn genre doesn't mean that you can't surprise readers and write unpredictable and exciting prose. In fact, writing in an established genre can make this easier because you already have set structures to play with. Readers are used to reading these kinds of books, so they're expecting certain things to happen in a certain order. You can play with those expectations as a writer and shock your readers by moving things in a different direction.
I'm telling you, Frank, this is where we need to look, right here.
There's nothing new under the sun, but that shouldn't scare you off writing your novel. It doesn't need to be completely new. Nothing is. Also, this is your first book. I wouldn't even concern yourself with originality. Writing is a craft and you'll need to do a lot of it to get really good at how you craft a novel. In fact, there's a certain freedom in knowing that you don't have to write a perfect book the first time around. So let's knock this first fear on the head. Now, just a quick side note, if you're enjoying this video, I would absolutely love it if you'd hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It would really help alleviate some of my own fears. No one is watching.
I'm alone.
Shouting into the void. Anyway, if you like it, like it. This is a common one, and let me start by saying that I'll have 3 or 4 ideas come crashing into my mind every week, which are both intriguing and thrilling, but ultimately not enough to support a novel. But I'll let you in on a little secret. No idea is solid enough to support a whole book, because the idea is just the spark. It's the initial impetus to get moving. It's something that excites you, generates lots of ideas, and motivates you to expand on that idea and build something a little more solid. You need a foundation to build a house, and one steel rod won't do the trick. You need to put supports in place, and pour concrete, and sink pillars into the ground, and to sticky metal things, and scaffolding, and bricks and such. I've reached the end of my building related knowledge, so we should get back to it. The point is that you can't build a whole novel off a single idea, but that idea can be the starting point for a solid outline which does become the foundation for your novel. So here's an example of an idea I had a little while back. It's about a future world where sick leave is taken by stepping out of your own body and temporarily existing in limbo until your body recovers. So in this world, people who work in corporate offices head to a special floor dedicated to a kind of sick leave stasis where their bodies are allowed to heal over time and their minds are sent off to some wonderful, blissful limbo for the duration of their leave. Now, there are some really interesting things about this idea, and it's already spurring my imagination on, which is a great sign, but the idea on its own isn't enough for a novel. The problem is that it's primarily about setting rather than plot. There's no central character, no primary struggle, no obstacles to overcome, and so on. So before we go tossing this idea away, let's try to think through it a little further and tease out some more possibilities with a few pointed questions. Who is the hero of the story, and who is the antagonist? What's the primary conflict within the book, and who is on both sides of that conflict? How is the conflict ultimately going to be resolved? What does our protagonist's journey look like? Is it a journey of discovery, struggle through adversity, a slow decline, revenge? What does the climax of the story look like? Or what details about that climax can we start to outline? Thinking through questions like this and sketching out answers as we go will help us move beyond a single idea and start to build out a framework to support our novel. If you're not sure on a protagonist, try a few different options. Change their physical characteristics, give them a physical or psychological injury, a faithful companion, the ability to smell crime. At this stage of the process, you're basically throwing out ideas and seeing which of them sticks. Some things you'll be drawn to immediately, so hold on to those and get rid of anything that doesn't really fit. It shouldn't take long to start to develop more of a story around the central idea that you've come up with. In our previous example, the protagonist could be a young man who works in HR and manages the day shift on the sick leave floor. Perhaps during the course of his duties, he realizes that something is wrong. While they're in limbo, someone or something is using the recovering bodies for some nefarious purpose, and our hero needs to go digging to find out what's going on. There's a corporate structure to the story, so an immediate choice of villain could be our HR professional's manager, or perhaps the silent partners who own the company. You can see how in just a few moments, by asking some key questions, new ideas begin to spawn and our original concept is starting to take shape into something more sustainable. Just a quick side note, most of the ideas that I ditch aren't because they don't have enough substance to support a novel. It's because I'm not really prepared to do the work necessary to tease out a novel from those initial ideas. If the idea doesn't excite me after the initial outline sketching, or if a lot of the concepts I'm bringing up are relatively unoriginal or close to some of my own work, I'll usually part ways with the idea. Writing a novel is a large time investment, so I'd rather save that time for an idea which has some legs to it, something that excites me throughout the whole process. So I'll reiterate the point then. A single idea isn't going to be enough to support a novel, but it might be the spark that leads to a rough outline which can. Another common fear is not being able to clearly see the climax and resolution of your story, and worrying that you'll never get there if you haven't clearly mapped it out before you start writing. Now, in my case, this isn't true, but that's because my preferred writing style is more of the explorer than the planner. And I've got a solid track record of being able to uncover a great climax and a satisfying resolution throughout the actual writing process. So I'll start almost every novel I write without actually knowing the ending. But not everyone is wired like me, and again, I've spent years defining my most effective writing method and getting comfortable with the way that I write best. You're just starting out, so it will likely be a lot safer and more rewarding to lean towards planning rather than just exploring. The easiest and most comprehensive way to ensure that your idea will work and that you'll land on a satisfactory conclusion to your novel is to map out the complete outline of your book from start to finish. This will take time and effort, but it's the best way to clearly see exactly what your novel is going to look like before you start writing. If it helps, don't think of the outline as a separate part of the writing process. Think of it as the first step in writing your novel. So technically, if you're writing an outline, you've already started writing your novel. Congratulations! But don't fall into the trap of obsessing over that outline. Don't let the outline become your primary focus, so that you end up with a fantastic outline sitting on your shelf for years while your novel goes unwritten. The outline is the foundation on which you're going to write your novel. It's just the first step, so don't agonize over it. Keep it simple, and remember the goal for this is to give you the confidence so that you know where your book is going, but ultimately, you need to get writing. Now, I won't go through the outlining process in detail here, but I'll have another video of that dropping later on. For now, I'd suggest something like the following. Write down everything you can think of about your book, character, plots, ideas, everything. Use the questions I mentioned earlier to tease out details from that initial idea and then write everything down. Arrange those initial thoughts into some kind of order, focusing on the key plot points, the key actions which will drive the story forward. Plot these out step by step so that you should end up with a 3 or 4 page basic outline. This is the point where you'll want to wrestle with the climax and resolution to your novel. If you can get to this point, it will make what follows a lot easier. Now, another side note, don't get mired down in world building and don't agonize over the details of your book at this point. Anything that isn't a simple plot point, push it to the end of the document and keep it separate from the main outline. Using your basic outline as a starting point, begin to expand on key plot points. Turn a single word into a few sentences or a sentence into a paragraph. Depending on your own level of comfort, you might need to experiment with how long your detailed outline is going to be. But again, the focus here is on key plot points and the overall movement of the story. Keep world building ideas, character information, and so on away from the main outline. Record everything, of course, but make sure that your outline is as clean and concise as possible. A detailed outline like this will tell you with a high degree of confidence whether your book idea will go the distance. You'll be able to shape the twists and turns, tension points, character development, and so on at the outline level before you get to writing the book. You'll also be able to take a step back and look at the book as a whole from start to finish. If you can get this outline done, you've got yourself a map and you can start writing safe in the knowledge that you already know roughly at least where you're headed. This is a great tool for new writers and something that I highly recommend you do, even if it's something I don't. The 3 fears of a lack of originality, your idea not going the distance, and not knowing how your book will end, all knocked on the head in one convenient video. Not only have we dealt with some of the most common fears that stop new writers from starting their novel, we've also answered the clarity question. Dismissing the idea of not being original, teasing out your initial idea using clarifying questions, and writing a detailed outline so you can have confidence in your novel ending. All of this will give you the clarity and confidence you need to start writing. And start writing you shall! When you reach this point, you should definitely check out my other video on how to build out a first chapter. But for now, let me know in the comments if there are any other fear gremlins at work in your mind which I haven't addressed in this video. And remember, you're not alone. All of us have had to deal with these kinds of fears and a lack of clarity at some point during our creative journey. And as always, keep it real, keep it safe.